Hello, I'm Dr. William Schlosser with Washington State University School of the Environment. This is my classroom.
The Teakettle Experiment is about small mammals and forest ecology. These are effects of forest treatments on small mammals in the Sierra Nevada mixed conifer forest. Watch that video and this one to develop your application to the events you see. Right now, we are looking at another flying rodent through conifer forests in search of some truffles hiding below the tree roots. Eat it, scat it, and be cautious about those flames. The forest needs all these interactions to strike at equilibrium levels. Tweak that balance, and changes happen. We have studied trophic levels, species interaction types, and how some species benefit while some are non-affected. Sometimes they benefit from mutualistic interactions. This is where I want you to apply those skills to the landscapes where you witness them all. You will take this ability to all landscapes you interact on. This is a trait you will not forget. It can only become what you categorize from those biotic and abiotic relationships into categories that matter most. Remember, we humans are part of this interaction mix. Anthropogenic influences always shine where we light our attention. Soil moisture coming from water stored deep in the landscape is something we understand to be seeded and dependent on the climate of the region. Events like those established in the El Niño cycles put a change to our expectations. Soil moisture is the most critical component of tree survival as initial sprouting happens. Mycorrhizae are a big indicator of forest land health. I ask you to consider, how deep are their mycelium in the ground? Truffles are the fruiting body of the mycorrhiza, and that feeds the flying squirrel. They spread the truffle spores as they cover the forest and scatter their feces wide and far. What kind of relationship does the mycorrhiza and the tree form? What about the truffle and the flying squirrel? Trees are the nests of flying squirrels. Confirm the relationship they form. Owls to flying squirrels? What kind of relationship do they form? Know why these connections matter and confirm how they establish this linkage. How do new seedlings establish access to the deep water supplies in the forest? These moisture-driven systems like Teakettle, this means competition shifts from crown competition to root development and access to the mycorrhiza layer where they can access water all year long. Roots and truffle abundance are related and driven by the number of big trees on the sides. This effect is seen in the number of squirrels and the number of owls feeding on them. Thinning from below versus thinning intermediate. Define what this means and how the interactions with fire, photosynthesis, and wildlife habitat usage. Moderate thinning, frequent use of prescribed fire potentially leads to healthy forest ecosystems. Fire rejuvenates the plant health and vigor. Find the natural range of variability to mimic what the historic norms have brought to the system. We will discuss the role of prescribed fire as a surface fire, not ladder fuel carried to the crowns and crown fires that rage across the landscapes. Prescribed burning often happens at night when fuel moisture is high, and after rain has dropped on the site, making it in prescription. We try, but the reality of wildfire events has busted all normal wildfire event levels, and a lot of that is anchored on the realities that we were really good at putting out those fires for about 100 years. The fuel load has become exaggerated to the point of larger fires than ever seen before. Some will hang this on global warming, but I will tell you that a lot more is at the cause. We stopped wildfire incidents for a long time, and fuels built up. The source is mostly still there. It will burn, and we are in the position to stop ultimate tragedies of human death and habitat loss. How will you engage yourself in this chess game? Consider this interconnected web that shows how wildlife need contributions from the landscape, but the landscape also needs certain attributes from the wildlife. Tree sprouts need to tap roots into the mycorrhiza to get water supplies and the nutrients through this symbiosis. Trees provide nesting for flying squirrels. Squirrels feed on truffles and spread their spores. Spotted owls feed on the flying squirrels. Frequent low-intensity understory thinning with prescribed fire maintains landscapes where forest health is strengthened. Old-growth forests are maintained without high incidence of insect and disease catastrophe. Trees benefit from the squirrels spreading the truffle spores to spread the mycorrhiza, promoting tree health, thus making more spotted owl habitat who also feed on the flying squirrels. This is a big circle of life with loads of connections in all directions. Remember, the trophic levels begin where abiotic energy delivery first strikes the Earth. Photonic energy is captured by photosynthesizing plants to capture nitrogen through the roots and make those chloroplasts. That defines our trophic level 1. They are the primary producers. Here we see the participants coming into the primary consumer cadre as the flying squirrel, vole, and even the mycorrhiza. Did that one surprise you? A mushroom performing as the primary consumer? Sure. It gets energy from the plant just as if it were an herbivore, like a deer eating shrub. Confirm to yourself, what means of energy acquisition is used by truffles? Classify that one as herbivory. The spotted owl is a flying carnivore eating the squirrel and the vole. It is a predator, but not the top of the food chain. The northern goshawk takes on that role. This is a unique arrangement, so make sure you understand the processes and be able to apply them to everywhere you land. Ask yourself, how do new seedlings establish access to the deep water supplies in this forest? Moisture-driven systems like Teakettle means the competition shifts from crown competition to root development and access to mycorrhizal layer where they can access the water all year long. Mycorrhiza are fine fungal layers capable of drilling deep into the landscape to access water and nutrients, oftentimes out of reach to plants. However, mycorrhiza cannot photosynthesize, so no nitrogen or carbon become available to it. That is not until they symbolize with a plant to strike a trade of water for nutrients. Roots and truffle abundance are related and driven by a number of big trees on the sites. This effect is seen in the number of squirrels and the number of owls feeding on them. Cover the trophic levels we all know well by now. Put them into the matrix of interactions across this environmental space. See those energy transfer links, and know that interruption at any point will impact subsequent energy transmissions. Mutualism, commensalism, competition, amensalism, predation, parasitism, herbivory. You know these interaction types well by now, but make sure you can identify effects to interacting species. Cooperative mutualism and both parties benefit. Drop down to consumerism with predation and see the owl eats the squirrel to see one benefit and the other gets the end of life. Consider those trees, and consider thinning from below versus thinning intermediately, or thinning from above. Define what this means, and how the interactions with fire, photosynthesis, and wildlife habitat usage changes. Moderate tree population thinning and frequent use of prescribed fire can lead to healthy forest ecosystems. Fire can rejuvenate plant health and vigor. Find the natural range of variability to mimic what historic norms have brought to this system. Mushrooms are as important to trees as they are to squirrels. In fact, a tree's survival depends on mushrooms, or more importantly, to the mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza literally means fungus root, and denote a symbiotic relationship between plant roots and certain fungi. The below-ground truffles cannot release their spores to the air and depend on squirrels and other rodents for dispersal. Rodents sniff out the truffles, which have a unique and powerful odor. After they eat them, the spores pass through their digestive system into the forest floor and without damage. In fact, the feces-laden fertilizer helps them thrive. Study these interacting species. Know where each interaction type is based. Consider how the red fir and the mycorrhiza interact. It is mutualism, and both benefit from this trade. Look to those trophic levels to see mycelium at level 2, while the tree are always residing at level 1. Keep this flowing to see how trees compete against each other as they compete for moisture, nutrients, light, and space. The same tree experiences commensalism as it provides a nest for the owl at trophic levels 1 and 3, respectively. Work through this list and convince yourself how these interactions translate across this pitch. You have a good feel for this? Great. Articulate what is the event happening at interaction D. What about interaction between lichens and mycorrhiza? Or maybe between lichens and spotted owls? Consider it, articulate it, and convince yourself you know. Forest fires have long been an issue of forest fighters who wanted to make them stop. Well, that was the original theme of the first U.S. Forest Service chief, Gifford Pinchot, in 1905. Chief Pinchot made the mantra to hold that line with dirt. Stop the fire. This was the overriding theme for nearly 100 years. Do not lose those beautiful trees to wildfire. Save the wildlife, and save those homes built in and around trees. Our technologies have made incredible events happen, like our ability to jump out of perfectly working planes to parachute to the ignition point of a lightning strike. Dirt and saws make that fire stop. Well, today, helicopters can drop water and retardant to a point. Incredible, right? We need to ask ourselves where equilibrium was struck before we inserted our values to these lands. Trees, shrubs, mycorrhiza, owls, and running water all balanced once upon a time. Inserting prescribed fire has met some of the imbalance we made as we stopped all those fires. We have partially made a superficial fix with prescribed burns. Fall prescribed burns are made only after a quarter inch of rain falls, with firm fire lines created, water with hoses, saws, Pulaski, and firefighters. Burn the treated landscapes and prevent fire spillover. Well, we try to replicate what nature naturally did. Will that fix the problem? I take you to Benoit County, Idaho, where most of the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation, the Chichoumish tribe, calls home. I did the wildland fire mitigation plans for both the county and the tribe from 2002 through 2017. In these events, we analyzed the Wildland-urban interface, the WUI. I based the analysis on geospatial locations of structures, infrastructure, the economy, and the way of life to show these polygons of population concentrations. The biggest city in the county seat is St. Mary's, near the northeastern reaches, with Plummer, the tribal headquarters, located to the west of that. Much of this county is populated by forest lands and is scattered with rural homes and communities. This helps describe where our risk exposure lies. This is Benoit County, and its center is a place simply called Benoit. This is where we take a closer look. Topographically, this area is a pitch of going up or down, sometimes both at the same time. Homes dominate those flattish areas and roads link most all of them together. See the rivers to know what supports plant life and wildlife. Forests dominate most of these lands. Forest management has achieved a patchwork of mixed forest ages, and little is not in productive forest status. The major forest management organizations in this area cooperate with wildfire planning, prescribed burning, and reforestation efforts. This is one example, located only 25 miles from the WSU campus, where the Teakettle Experiment is enacted every day. I tell people many days that we are awash in information and details to help our activities soar. Most challenging is to use those details to make stronger decisions about what we do, where priorities stand, and how we will identify desired future conditions. This is historic fire regime, classifying into 5 groups based on wildfire reoccurrence rates. Most of this area is in fire regime group 1, with wildfires burning with low intensity and short return intervals. We step this over to fire regime condition class, described into 3 categories, to show this in terms of where lands are in wildfire occurrence equilibrium, shown here in green, condition class 1. You can see where it is out of whack, those yellow 1 or 2 cycles out of normal fire occurrence. Those red zones show the highest risk, and when they burn, it is not expected to be at historic intensity. It is expected to be hotter and larger. Mean fire return interval is that measure of how often lands historically burned. Much of this area burned in low-intensity fires from about 5 to 20 years apart. Others stayed out of the fire for 4 to 5 decades, while some reached 100 years or more between blazes. This is what historically happened. I developed an analytical tool called Fire-Prone Landscapes, which looks at where wildfires have burned over the past 100 years, to geomathematically assess slope, cover type, crown closure, hillside position, and aspect to see where current wildfire risks reside. These are tools our anthropogenic attention can use as we manage the landscapes we touch and influence. All of this comes back to that discussion of the WUI. Where are we located and how does it impact the wildlands we call our homes? We define these urban, interface, intermix, rural, and wildland categories. This is an anthropogenic focus on what we can use to apply to the natural environment. The plants, fungi, rodents, deer, elk, and moose. The birds have been part of our attention too. How will you use these tools after today? How does it matter to you? Wildfire control for 100+ years has mainly been focused on total wildfire containment. On National Park Service lands, this was relaxed to let it burn within prescription. This is what was applied in 1987 on Yellowstone National Park. Let it burn, but give attention to critical wildlife habitat, human structures, and the interface with human habitation. Okay, let it burn within our conditions. Wildfire is an abiotic force, and with attentive planning can be a positive tool to advance health and prosperity for humans and wildlife. Will you be part of that successful management team? You have heard a lot about this spotted owl, and we will discuss it more as we move ahead. Now, I want you to consider it in terms of its interactions and how we reach that population equilibrium. Define what that even means. Describing it well is a great starting point for you to take.